sectors. Eskom spokesperson Sikonati Manjanja has urged the public to continue using electricity sparingly.
Due to the lower weekend demand, load shedding will be reduced to stage 1. Eskom expects to rely on the use of emergency generation reserves to supplement available supply and to limit the stage of load shedding during this period. Again, Eskom would like to remind the public that load shedding is implemented only as a last resort to protect the national grid. We therefore request the public to continue using electricity sparingly to reduce the occurrence of load shedding.
Africa's first COVID-19 vaccination production facility is at risk of closing its doors as hopes for producing and exporting bulk vaccines are low. Some scientists say Africa has already reached a high level of immunity because of natural infection by the highly transmittable Omicron variant and by previous vaccination. However, other experts say vaccinations will remain an essential tool in combating the coronavirus as it becomes endemic. Pharmaceutical expert Paul Waits says a halt in the local production of the COVID-19 vaccination in Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape could have a long-term negative effect.
In the short term, probably not that much, because it appears as if most of the vaccine that people's actually been taking has been coming from Europe. However, long term, I truthfully believe that the continent needs to be able to manufacture its own pharmaceuticals and vaccines. If another strain of the variant develops and we need a different vaccine, unless we can gain more rapid access to it, it will be a huge problem.
Activists against gender-based violence have held a candlelit march and prayer session in Mbombela in memory of 28-year-old Hilary Gadi, whose body was found this week. Hilary was the daughter of the former EFF General Secretary Godridge Gadi. She was reported missing last Friday. Her body was found in a plantation close to the road in Mashishing on Tuesday morning by farm workers. Gadi will be laid to rest tomorrow in Mbombela. And a Muslim cleric has asked a Kenyan court not to release him from prison despite being acquitted of terrorism charges. Sheikh Guyo Gosaburu was arrested in January of 2018 and charged with possessing material promoting a terrorist group and for collaborating with Al-Shabaab. But this week, the court released him, saying the state had failed to prove its case. He, however, refused to leave the notorious Kamiti prison, saying he feared for his life. The cleric has alleged that he could be abducted and killed by the state once he's freed. The chief magistrate ordered that he could stay at the prison for a period not exceeding 30 days, after which he would be set free. He, however, has to pay the government for his stay at the facility. A recap of our top story at this hour. President Cyril Ramaphosa says South Africa is committed to combat climate change while supporting the local economy. For SFM News, I'm Nomsam Dluli. More news at 7.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide, leading the conversation.
Giving you new perspectives and information with deep dive expert analysis of the biggest stories that shaped your world this week.
It is exactly 5 minutes after 6 p.m. Welcome to This Week Today. My name is Oliver Dickson, and I'm happy to be in your company. I'm pleased to be in your company. I'm with you all the way up until 7 p.m. this evening. Of course, we're going to take a deep dive into some of the biggest issues of the week, and we're going to start off with the state capture report, at least certain part of the state capture report, not the entire part 4, which was released to the president last week, Friday, I think. And we now have an opportunity to look into the report and ask the real question: who is going to end up behind bars, and when is that going to happen? When will the money be recuperated, and how soon will that happen? Those are the most important set of questions. But of course, the minutiae of the report matters insofar as it will determine how that is gone by and about by the NPA and the various investigative and prosecutorial functionaries of the state and the justice system. We start off by looking at the Eskom part of the state capture report. And then we're going to look at the asbestos part of the state capture report. That Free State asbestos tender, of course, very controversial tender, because it is exactly the reason why Ace Magashule is currently in court, and the pretext to which the ANC used when he was suspended from the party as Secretary General with its step-aside rule. Later on in the show, we're going to take a look at a judgment in the Constitution, in the Supreme Court of the United States of America, the Roe v. Wade, Roe versus Wade case. This is a case from the 1920s, I think 1927, that finally gave abortion rights to women in America, that made it legal for them to have abortions. And every Republican government since has attempted to stack the Supreme Court in such a way that it becomes overwhelmingly conservative so that they can overturn Roe v. Wade. And that was one of Donald Trump's biggest trump cards when he ran for president, right? It's the ticket he ran on, effectively. We will now take a look into what the overturning of that case means, because it has again been re-looked at by the Supreme Court of Appeal, where they have a 5-4 split, I think, in terms of conservatives having the upper hand, especially after the appointment of Justice Kavanaugh, and the Roe v. Wade has now been overturned, or will be overturned if the leak is anything to go by, if the leak is indeed a legitimate a reflection of the court's decision in that instance. Abortion rights will be taken away from women in America, but that America is such an imperialist nation that it means that abortion rights will be taken away from millions of other women who do not live in America, but who rely on clinics that rely on American funding. It may dry up. It may well be the case that the imperial project of the United States of America will have to be in the vein of extending the jurisprudence of America throughout the world, its conceptualization and framework of democracy and law. And that means that many clinics may now run out of funding if they do not refuse to issue out abortion services. They will have to turn down abortion services if they will want to continue receiving funding from United States of America or institutions from the United States of America who at least reflect the politics and the law and the jurisprudence of the country. That's what's coming up on the show this evening. Remember, you can stream the show live on YouTube. We are live on the SAFM YouTube channel. If you want the link, just go onto the SAFM Twitter page, Facebook page. The link is live. Then you can watch the show. Or, of course, you can listen to us on the DSTV audio bouquet. And we are on 104 to 107 nationwide. Tweet us at SAFM Radio, or you can tweet me directly at Oliver_speaking, Oliver Dickson on Facebook. I would like to engage you on the various topics that we will be having this evening. And you can find us on any of the social media platforms if you'd like to engage. We are taking your calls this evening. It is 011 714 2006. And if you want to send us a WhatsApp voice note, that number is 0614 104 107. Keep those voice notes short. We've got a 1-hour show, very tightly packed. And so if you want to express an opinion that you think deserves to make it to air, keep it short. 30-second voice note, and let us know what you think. Perhaps you have a question to any of our expert panel members that we will have on the show this evening. All of that's coming up on the other side of this.
This Week Today, Fridays, 6 to 7 p.m.
And so, taking a look at that first case that we will be looking at, 15 billion in dodgy deals at Eskom is what the state capture report points to. And that's just during the Zuma rule, right? And these are 15 billion in deals issued out or at least benefited to families or businesses related to the Gupta family. And the state capture report speaks here about criminal charges against Brian Mulife, Machela Koko, Anush Singh, and some of the board members that were involved during that era, specifically board members from that 2014 board, right? And that's a very important step in terms of recovering some of the money that may have been squandered there. Nearly 15 billion rand, 14.7 is the exact figure that the Constitutional Court speaks of. Sorry, that the State Capture Commission speaks of over there. And this is not small money. Eskom is in 400 billion rand of debt at the moment. they need to pay their debt somehow. And recovering 15 billion would go a long way to repaying some of their debt. But the question is, what has these actions and these contracts and these dubious deals done for the state of Eskom that leads us to the perpetual state of load shedding that we're living under? As we speak, we're under stage 2 load shedding at the moment. So that's the conversation and that's the question. Importantly, the NPA and Eskom had a meeting. They came out and said that they will collaborate in getting some of the charges that have been recommended by the state capture report to be, prosecuted, and that, justice is served at the end of the day. Joining me now on the line is the spokesperson of the National Prosecuting Authority, Advocate Mthunzi Maga. Advocate Mthunzi, thank you so much for your time this evening. What do you guys mean by collaboration?
Good evening, Oliver, and good evening to your listeners. The surname is pronounced Maga, not Maha. It's a closer surname.
Oh, my apologies.
No, that's fine. What is important for starters is the fact that Eskom is an important stakeholder. And therefore, because we are seized with investigations on matters that relate to Eskom, that relate to state capture and other organized crimes, serious crimes, we felt it necessary to establish a working relationship with Eskom. Now, we need to collaborate in the sense that Eskom, in most of these cases that we'll be dealing with, have a keen interest, which we share. And as such, there is information that is in their possession and evidence that is in their possession, which we believe we need to have as an investigative arm in the form of investigative directorate, the ID, in order to ensure that our efforts of prosecuting those responsible for fraud, corruption, and state capture at Eskom are prosecuted effectively and successfully. Therefore, we had these discussions to say, now that they've set up a team of lawyers, internal and external, it would be important that we share that information and that we have another point on both Eskom and ID so that that sharing of information and that cooperative work is effective. You will also recall that Eskom has been a victim of cable theft and damage to essential infrastructure crimes. And of importance is the fact that we have appreciated that the arrests are only in respect of the runners, not the people that benefit financially from the cable theft and damage to infrastructure, and those that orchestrate and organize the same. So we felt that we should commit to assisting Eskom in the investigation and prosecution of those cases so that they liaise directly with law enforcement and that crime intelligence does their work in terms of ensuring that there's intelligence that is collated in the form of evidence that will lead us to the perpetrators in the form of those that organize these crimes. So it's a basket of issues that were discussed with outcomes. And obviously, in the coming months, we will be enrolling some seminal cases that relate to SOEs, including Eskom.
Yeah. The NPA has been criticized for being too slow to enact prosecutions and often not building strong enough cases, specifically when it comes to cases related to politicized cases related to corruption. What will be different this time around? One, on the politicization of the cases and why the NPA is essentially have been criticized for being slow. Will it be less slow this time through this collaboration? But importantly, do you guys have the resources for this?
We do have the resources, but we would welcome more resources if they could come our way. I think let's focus on the state capture cases in particular. The challenge that is there for the NPA and the law enforcement is the fact that the Zondo Commission did not conduct criminal investigations. And the standard of proof in terms of the evidential evaluation or assessment that they conduct is that of balance of probabilities, it's civil in nature, whilst ours is proof beyond reasonable doubt. And as such, when evidence comes from the State Capture Commission, it does not automatically mean that you must place those cases in court, roll, and therefore prosecute.
Right.
There needs to be the first leg, that is the investigation of those cases to test the.
On that point of investigation, do you have enough evidence from the state capture report as is, without having to ask Eskom for additional evidence and additional resources and information? Do you have enough evidence from the state capture report to begin investigations and prosecutions as we currently stand?
As we stand, there are matters that in the coming months will be coming to court because investigations have been underway and they continue. That means we have evidence. And there are also investigations that are underway that are continuing. But what is important, Oliver, is the fact that I am saying not all cases or evidence that comes from the state capture is court ready or prosecution ready. There are those cases that still require investigations, which is why there's this collaborative work that's underway. That's why the meeting took place, to get the corroboration to be at the level that the national director would be satisfied with in terms of prioritizing the cases, in terms of coordinating those cases. Because remember, this is huge work that is underway that needs to be undertaken.
Just a last question, 30 seconds. It is an unrelated question. It's okay if you don't answer it. I did not bring you on for this. But will the same collaboration happen with other institutions, specifically with authorities in the Free State related to the asbestos case in particular? And I know that Ace Magashule is in court right now. The NPA is pursuing him on criminal and corruption charges related to the asbestos case. The state capture report doesn't implicate him in anything serious, really. Will you look at the state capture report and reconsider the position the NPA has in terms of pursuing that case in the Bloemfontein High Court?
We are holistic in our approach on investigations. And our strategy is to ensure that where the evidence points us, we go. If there is a need to corroborate with any entity that has an interest in ensuring that those implicated in the state capture are held to account, we will go that route. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. Really, really do appreciate it. That is the NPA's spokesperson, Advocate Mthunzi Matla. Up next, we're going to be speaking further on the state capture report and asking questions around other parts of the report that are equally as important. That's coming up on the other side of this.
The SABC News Portal is your one-stop digital platform for all the news you need. Stay connected with the latest and breaking stories. Listen to all SABC radio stations live, including podcasts, and also watch the SABC News channel with clips and live streams of all the big news events. Simply download the SABC News app on your smartphone from the Play or App Store. SABC News, independent and impartial. The SABC News Portal is your one-stop digital platform for all the news you need. Stay connected with the latest and breaking stories. Listen to all SABC radio stations live, including podcasts, and also watch the SABC News channel with clips and live streams of all the big news events. Simply download the SABC News app on your smartphone from the Play or App Store. SABC News, independent and impartial. SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.1 FM in Johannesburg.
This Week Today with Oliver Dickson.
It is 21 minutes after 6 p.m. It's a Friday, so you are listening to This Week Today. My name is Oliver Dickson. We're taking a deep dive into the state capture report. You heard previously from the NPA spokesperson on their collaboration with Eskom in terms of prosecuting those that the state capture report pointed out that they should be prosecuting. But let's talk about the veracity of some of the cases. The NPA spokesperson says, well, they have a different standard. Their burden of proof to prosecute is much higher than that of, say, a different institution like a quasi-judicial process, like a state capture commission, for instance, right? And so they have a higher evidence burden, and to meet their evidentiary burden, they have to collaborate with institutions to access information to be able to make sure that the national director is satisfied with the watertightness of the case. But so it's important then that we ask, if the state capture report didn't give us enough evidence, then what really was the point? That's an important question, and I want to ask that to Advocate Stephanie Fick, who's the Executive Director from OUTA's Accountability Division. Advocate Fick, did the State Capture Commission fall short of collecting enough evidence to create cases for prosecution?
Good evening. Let me answer it this way. I think the State Capture Commission was definitely necessary. It wasn't their main purpose to collect enough evidence to convict someone. That is the constitutional duty of the NPA. I think what is very important for the State Capture Commission to achieve at the end of this is, except for all these revelations and the fact that they went through all this evidence, is the recommendations. How do we make sure that this never happens again? And what can we do in order to change the status quo that it doesn't happen again? Now, I understand the NPA, and yes, their burden of proof is quite high. But then I want to ask the following question. Some of these revelations, and especially Eskom, Rudy will tell you, the project manager of our state capture cases, is that these cases were laid in 2016, 2017 already. They had ample opportunity to get the evidence if they don't have enough in terms of the Commission's report.
Rudy Heineke, who's the project manager for the state capture portfolio out at OUTA, is also on the line with us. Rudy, I once had a conversation with Wayne Duvenacher, and he told me that OUTA has collaborated with the NPA before. These collaborations, do they actually work? Does the National Prosecuting Authority have the forensics capability to be able to really make these collaborations worthwhile?
Good evening, Oliver, and yes, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, like Wayne said, we have worked closely with the NPA and more especially with the Investigating Directorate before, provided them with a lot of information, more so the information that we collected from the Gupta leaks. But if the question, if they have the capability, I think I will add to what Stefani said with regards to this is their constitutional duty. This is the institution that must do the job. This is the only institution in the country that can prosecute somebody. So if they do not have the capability and the necessary skills and expertise at this stage, then it is it is sad, because they should have this, because, like I said, they are the only institution in this country that can put somebody in jail.
Outside of prosecutions, Advocate Fick, around those who have been implicated, Brian Molefe, Machela Koko, Anush Singh, and some of the board members from their 2014 board, other than prosecuting those people criminally, on a civil end of the report, there is a conversation about recovering the money, recovering some of the funds. 15 billion is a figure, 14.7 billion is a figure that we've been given. How does recovering funds actually work? Is the NPA responsible for that, or are there other state functionaries in the justice system?
let me start off by saying that in terms of asset recovery, the NPA can use there's an asset forfeiture unit that is quite integral in getting some of getting funds, especially if there's, criminal transgressions, to get some of the funds back. But we also know that the SIU has got capabilities, in a civil way, also getting money back from criminals in a different setting, the tribunal, and they can also get some of the assets back. So I think, in my view, is that there's ample legislation that gives the NPA and bodies like the SIU the capability of going after the funds. The only worrying question is, didn't they wait too long? Yes, we need to take proper processes. I think we should be proud of the fact that we have a constitution, a democracy, and so forth, and that people's rights are important. So it's important to follow processes, but didn't we wait too long in order to follow these processes that are supposed to work in our favor?
Look, it's going to take a lot of money and resources and perhaps even time to do this, and we can shorten that by making more resources available. Should the NPA welcome private prosecution?
Like Rudy has alluded to, and I've said before, is that constitutionally, the NPA is obliged to deal with prosecutions. Private prosecution, if you read the Act and you read the objective, private prosecution was never there in order to substitute something that the NPA is supposed to do. Private prosecutions are really there in extraordinary circumstances where a complainant who was personally aggrieved can then privately prosecute when the prosecution refuses to prosecute, not unable to or is taking too long, it refuses to prosecute. So I think what we do need is legislative reform if we want to pursue private prosecutions. But it will be a sad day if we substitute private prosecution, and I don't think it's possible in terms of our constitution. But if we need to do private prosecutions because the NPA is unable or unwilling to do it, we need to then fix the National Prosecuting Authority so that they can prosecute in terms of their mandate.
Yeah. Rudy, before we move on to the asbestos case, and I do want us to spend a little bit of time there because criminal charges have been recommended there as well. What are some of the key takeaways from the State Capture report about institutionally and structurally that's wrong with Eskom that made it possible for this level of looting to be able to take place in the first instance, and how that can be remedied?
I think we must take a step back. It's not only at Eskom, but the whole state capture project, if you look at it, from the first report that the Chief Justice made available, it is all about appointments. And he connected the dots so beautifully in this last report to say that you can, for each and everything that went wrong at Eskom, there was, a little line up to the former president to say he appointed Malusi Gigaba. He appointed Lynn Brown. Lynn Brown appointed the board of Eskom in 2014. The board appointed Molefe and Singh. And if you have those role players in a syndicate like this, in place, then it is quite easy for them to, to deviate from policies and procedures, and for them to do what they did.
And it's quite interesting. You mentioned the Lynn Brown appointment and then she appoints the board, and the board appoints Brian Molefe. And it's interesting that we speak specifically about Jacob Zuma. But what does it say about the current administration under Cyril Ramaphosa, who, having been the deputy president at the time, and Cyril went to the State Capture Commission and says, "No, I endorsed Brian Molefe's appointment. In fact, I asked for him to be appointed because I believed in his capabilities at the time." Cyril told us that. Does the report speak to any of that? Does it say that Cyril may have erred, that he too needs to take some accountability here for Brian Molefe's appointment?
Well, he did say that, listen, I endorsed Brian Molefe for the appointment of Eskom because everybody at that stage in government believed that Brian Molefe did an excellent job at Transnet. In retrospect, we know it was not the case, because at that stage in 2014, late 2013, 2014, when this happened, the Transnet shenanigans didn't surface that much. So one must maybe have a bit of sympathy to say that at that stage, everything looked well, and this person in Molefe looked like a very good appointment.
Yeah. Advocate, let's speak about the asbestos case here for a second, Advocate Vic. Timothy Mukesi has been implicated here for having taken a bribe of 600,000 Rand from Edwin Sodi, the founder and CEO of Black Hat Consulting. Timothy Mukesi was the erstwhile head of human settlements in the Free State, and the state capture report recommends that criminal charges of corruption be instituted against him, and criminal charges of corruption against Edwin Sodi relating to that particular bribe and some other stuff related to those transactions. On top of that, it also recommends that 225 million needs to be recovered from that particular project. Are you taken by surprise that only the two of them have been implicated and not many more?
I think because there's already a criminal case, is that the judge Zondo didn't go into too much detail with regards to who else should be prosecuted. I think that might be an explanation as to why. But you know what? It remains a recommendation. So let's accept for one minute that there was an oversight. I'm definitely not saying that, but let's say there was an oversight. Again, we come back to two things that I think I want to highlight. It is the NPA's duty, and it was the NPA's duty. In fact, I think we've seen a state capture in the NPA as well, because they have taken an enormous amount of time to even start prosecuting anybody that is involved in state capture. Yeah. And now we are behind, because we must remember where I have sympathy, and in a small way, is that crime doesn't stop. You know, the robberies and the rapes and the murders and the serious crimes do not stop. And now we still need to do catch up with regards to state capture capture cases. But I think what is also important about the recommendations is that we need to make sure that the people in important positions are, that they are appointed in positions that suits them. In other words, get to the right people for the right positions. But then, very importantly, take action against the people that is no longer appropriate. So let's say, for example, Brian Molefe was the correct person. Take action against him the minute there's transgressions. But let's take the Free State, for example. Yeah. Sabine Zwane, that was then just shifted off being the Minister of Mineral Resource. He was not qualified to do that. Yeah. Plus, there were shenanigans already identified in the Free State. And why didn't the Premier at the time also take action? So it is important. We need ethical leadership. Yeah. And part of that is, yes, prosecutions, but also taking them to task and making sure that they are just not, circulated and put in a different position.
Really, one of the other recommendations related to the asbestos case was that there should be a complete audit and a relook into every single contract that was issued out by that particular department. That's a mammoth task to execute, because it's hundreds of contracts. Will that yield any sort of result? Is that an important exercise to be able to determine more criminality, or should we just say, look, we've closed this chapter of state capture, let's move on?
Well, if you go back and you look at the report, it started off with the reports of the Public Protector and the AG at that time. And I think, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can go and look at the audits done by the Auditor General. You can look at the recommendations at that time. Okay, this was just a specific contract in the Free State. But the Public Protector also, before it was shifted around in the Estino matter, the Public Protector also investigated the Estino matter. So it's not to reinvent the wheel, but a complete audit. It's not only in the Free State where it's needed. I think, all over the show, and Stefanie will agree with me, if we look at everything that is on our tables at OUTA, it is not only the Free State. It's not only, the big SOEs. It is small departments. It's local municipalities. So the the action should be for civil society, for public servants, to have that integrity again, and to say, listen, I'm proud of my work. I'm proud of what I'm doing here in the public service. Where it is and what I do doesn't matter. But I must be proud to do this, and I must do it with integrity, and I must be ethical when I, do my job. And it's the culture that we must change. We can go and investigate for years, and court cases will go on for years. But if we don't change the narrative or the integrity and the way we work, it's going to be a losing battle all the way.
Yeah. Even Advocate Stefani Fick, even if no prosecutions happen, no one goes to jail after the state capture report, what value can we draw from this? What should the average South African voter know from this report about Eskom the next time they experience load shedding leading up to the next election? That will be an important piece in their decision-making process at the polls.
Yeah, that is a loaded question because it all goes back to, and funny enough, just today, the Portfolio Committee sat on the amendment to the Electoral Act because, remember, the Constitutional Court declared certain parts of that act unconstitutional because it doesn't make provision for independent candidates, which is, we need accountability. And we need, as voters, to understand that we basically have the power at the voting box to make a decision as to who we want, in power, and that the people in power will take the responsibility of handling matters in the best interest of South Africa. You know what was the saddest thing about this state capture report so far is the amount of money lost to corruption. And I agree wholeheartedly with Rudy. We need to change the perception, and we need to change the fact that corruption is evil. It really is really evil, and it makes sure that that money that was supposed to go to civil society, to the health department, to our education for our kids was lost, and that the next time you sit in the dark, realizes that an enormous amount of money was taken away from Eskom, and that Eskom will most probably take a long time to function properly again. In fact, they need to make hard decisions, think about renewables, because coal is fast going out of fashion, but that's just my personal view. But that you sitting in the dark because of state capture, there is a direct link between the fact that we are not able to keep the lights on. But you know what's even worse than that? Because we can talk about whether we sit in the dark or not. There are people currently in South Africa that do not have access to electricity, that do not have access to water, that do not have access to proper sanitation. Kids that need to walk miles to go to a school that's most probably falling apart.
Yeah.
McKinsey paid back 1.1 billion. That's a drop in the bucket. But do we realize what we could have done with 1.1 billion rand?
Yeah.
It is enormous amounts, and we need to work on eradicating corruption to create a better South Africa for all.
Yeah. Just a last question, Rudy, as we wrap this up. We know what the NPA needs to do. We know what the justice system needs to do. We know what institutions that are integral to this need to do, such as Eskom. They need to volunteer information, give as much access to information to the NPA, the SIU, and the Asset Forfeiture Unit for this to happen. But what should the rest of us do going forward? What should the public do? And where does civil society lie in all of this? What's civil society to do after we've read these reports? Rudy?
Sorry, I just lost my signal there for a moment. Oliver, I think, it is a collective exercise. There's a lot of oversight bodies, professional oversight bodies that must come to the party. If you look at state capture and the amounts of money that was, exchanging hands, the banks must come to the party, and we must look at legislation, for example, on the FIC, so that it's not only that it doesn't only have a reporting duty, but that they can act as well. For civil society, I think if you look at the integrity of business people, as a private businessman, you should revert to or not do business with people implicated, in any of these reports, in the SIU report on the PPE contracts, etc., because I think it is shown there that there are people with no integrity, and they are costing the taxpayer and the country a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, and then civil society, obviously, keep on pushing and stick together and don't, lift your foot from the pedal. We must apply pressure all the time.
Absolutely. Rudy Heineke, thank you so much for your time this evening. Advocate Stefani Fick, thank you so much for your time this evening. Really, really do appreciate it. On the other side of this, we take a look at the Roe v. Wade judgment in America in the Supreme Court that leaked. Doesn't matter where the leak comes from, as the Republicans seem to want to pontificate. Everybody, it's so funny. They're all pointing hands to different people. But that conversation is coming up. What does that mean for reproductive health support, especially abortions in Africa, given that so many clinics in Africa are reliant on reproductive health support to be able to execute abortions because of the funding they get from the United States of America? That conversation on the other side of this.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
For unskippable, no clickbaiting, and cookie-free radio is still the best place to advertise your business at affordable rates. SAFM, with its national footprint and top personalities, offer advertisers distinctive opportunities to reach their target audience. Email sales@safm.co.za. SAFM, the influencer you can trust.
If you're active on social media and love SAFM, we hope you'll take a moment to like or follow our SAFM page on Facebook and Twitter. These are the best places to find all the guest information, conversations, and stories you love from your favorite presenters, along with regular updates from SABC News. And don't forget, you can send your questions to feedback@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversation. Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.1 FM in Johannesburg.
This week today, Fridays, 6 to 7 p.m.
It is 6:45 this evening. We're in the final segment of This Week Today. My name is Oliver Dickson, with you till the top of the hour. We've had some fascinating conversations so far this evening. What do you make of it? What are some of your thoughts, reflections on the NPA, on the State Capture report, based on the conversations we've had thus far? Give us a call, 011-714-2006. Send us a WhatsApp voice note on 0614-104-107. Do also tweet me. It is at Oliver_speaking. We're at SAFM Radio. You can find me on Facebook as well. It's simply Oliver Dickson over there. An important judgment in the United States Supreme Court has leaked. The judgment hasn't been handed down yet, but the judgment draft has leaked, and it seems that the American Supreme Court will be overturning the Roe v. Wade judgment, Roe versus Wade judgment. What does that mean? The Roe versus Wade judgment is a judgment from, the 1920s that gave reproductive health to women in reproductive health rights to women in America. That's to say that they can access abortions. It made it a constitutionally enshrined right that they can access abortions. Every Republican president since has tried tirelessly to overturn Roe v. Wade by stacking the Supreme Court in their favor, in a conservative favor. And every attempt thus far, and there's been many attempts, have seemingly failed up until now. Many argue that it was only a matter of time since the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh as a Supreme Court justice that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned. Funny enough, I saw a daily post, these supercuts that they do around every every justice that has been appointed in the last couple of years being asked what do they make of Roe v. Wade, and they said, well, it's the law of the land, and I support the law of the land. Yet they overturned it, or seemingly want to overturn it. That's an incredible hypocrisy. That's incredible hypocrisy on their end. But joining me for this conversation is Ponzo Pilane, who's a health journalist at Bheki Sisa, as well as Marion Stevens, who's the outgoing founding director of the Sexual and Reproductive Justice Coalition in South Africa. And she's a PhD candidate at the Department of Political Science at Stellenbosch University. I'm going to start with you, Ponzo Pilane. How threatening is this judgment to taking away abortion rights to people outside of America?
Thanks, Oliver. That's a very important question because I think a lot of people have been wondering the relevance for us in South Africa. So since Roe v. Wade was put in place, or since the judgment in 1973, there's been a concerted, intentional effort by anti-abortionists, mainly U.S. right-wing organizations lobbying against access to abortions. And because of the positioning of the U.S. in the bigger global sphere, it is quite concerning if we look at what happened with the global gag rule, which is another policy of the U.S. government that has been implemented by every Republican president and rescinded by
every Democratic president.
President that limited U.S. government money that was funding various organizations to even refer women to facilities for abortion services. And we saw Trump's iteration of this rule being the first time the policy was expanded to PEPFAR money, which is one of the biggest global health funds. Even when we look at it in South Africa, our government gets a lot of money from the PEPFAR funding. So it is quite concerning because it means that there's more of an emboldened action towards really curtailing access to abortion, not just in the U.S., but also outside of the U.S.
Marion Stevens, I want to bring you in here and ask this particular question. How strong is the anti-abortion lobby in South Africa in particular? And I'm talking here about NGOs and NPOs. I'm not talking about state institutions here, but just the American-funded, or not even American-funded, but just the anti-abortion lobby in South Africa. How strong is it?
So thanks for having me. Good evening, Oliver, and good evening, Ponzo. Friday evening discussion. So I want to kind of turn it around and say that, we think that there's, a critical mass of anti-abortion groups, but there's actually a continuum of efforts that work against the provision of public health, reproductive health services in South Africa, including abortion. And there are a number of instances where you have extremely well-funded and organized groups in South Africa that pretty much every 2 years have a litigation process. So, for example, the ACDP had the private members bill in 2017. In 2019, the Catholic Church in South Africa and Cause for Justice have put in place a request that every woman that has an abortion is asked if they want to bury their fetus. And we have argued that this puts undue burden on women and is in a sense coming out of Texas. But there are other areas that I want to highlight, in that the reality is that because we're always on the back foot, because of the context that Ponzo has outlined, we actually have never got on top of the provision of really sexual and reproductive health services within a reproductive justice framework post-apartheid. Something that takes into account ordinary women's lives and ability to parent, to get pregnant or not to get pregnant within our unequal society. So we have these stats about kids that are having coerced sex and 10, 11, 12, and then not being able to access services. What is it about our context that we are not able to put in place life-affirming, comprehensive sexuality education that teaches young girls and young children and young boys, whatever their gender, about consent and about where their body begins and where their body ends. We're not teaching them about the mechanics of sex, but we're teaching them about bodily autonomy, about respect, about emotional health, about their sexual health. So when you ask about the right wing, I think we need to not just think about some crazy evangelicals somewhere, which they are a large group, and I will say to you, yes, they're organized and well funded, but I think we need to be politically savvy and look at the continuum of an onslaught that has happened in South Africa since 1990, when Bush came in and we first had the overturning of the Gag Rule in our new democracy.
Yeah. Punso,
1990. Sorry, when was it? 1999.
Yes,
Sorry,
Bush was in 1990. You mean Bush the son, not Bush the father. Yeah, that would have been, 1999. Punso, I want to bring you in here. I just asked Marion, how strong is the anti-abortion lobby? The flip side to that is, how strong is the pro-abortion reproductive health education lobby in South Africa? Are we investing enough as institutions into teaching women about reproductive health, about abortion, what a safe abortion is, what it's not? Because the bottom line is, whether you ban abortions or not, they still will happen. They just will happen outside the purview of the state.
Just continuing with what Marion said, which is quite correct, and I fully agree with her. Within sexual reproductive health advocacy and activist spaces, there's a tagline that there's no such a thing as an illegal abortion, just an unsafe one. So I think that's where we should start. That you're right. Whether it's legalized in countries or not, abortions will happen. We just need to ensure that they're safe. But when we look at the sexual reproductive rights movement in South Africa, it's been happening for many, many years.
Yeah.
I mean, South Africa's Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Act, which is the law that governs how abortions should take place in South Africa, and who is legally able to get an abortion, and the kind of the standards for abortion care and services in South Africa, is one of the most progressive. However, as Marion will also, she's been in this field longer, will say that the implementation and the political will to ensure safe abortion is not there. If we look at, and part of it is the kind of the geopolitical, socio-political issues around funding and where funding comes from, but it's also the interpersonal, individual, which becomes a systemic within policies in departments of health and social development, on what people think about abortion and what they think women or people with uteruses and people who are pregnant can and cannot decide to do with their bodies.
Yeah.
So we have a big advocacy advocates. We have a lot of abortion providers that face so much discrimination, so much abuse doing their jobs in public hospitals because they're abortion providers. Like one woman has said that she's been called the devil. So I think the sexual reproductive health advocacy groups and efforts in South Africa are to be commended, but it is within an ecosystem that is not willing to acknowledge people's rights to bodily autonomy, to decide what to do with their bodies and when to do that.
Yeah, there is also the concern about the geopolitical ripple effect of this. The rise of Trump, shone the light on right-wing rise throughout the world. Bolsonaro, out in Brazil, and various other presidents, right? And there's a concern, really, that this could overturn the global north and its ripple effect onto Africa and the global south holistically. And that leads me to my final question for you, Marion. Surely we should no longer be at the whim of institutions from the global north for funding and their political disposition when it comes to women and the bodies of women. Surely clinics in Africa should be funded. But I don't know, the African Union should do something. Some institutions should do something. The government in South Africa should say, no, we're not going to make our clinics reliant on American funding, on European funding, especially if the politics and the law of that funding can change the politics and the law of us. That surely must be a threat to sovereignty somehow, somewhere. The question here is, what needs to be done to sever that relationship? Should we even sever that relationship?
Oliver, I think you need to go work for the Department of Health and tell them this, because I completely agree. I think their communications could benefit from your wise thinking. Absolutely. And what I also want to just highlight is that South Africa has never received any funding for abortion services from the US government. And one of the risks, I believe, is that most of our health budget, as a large proportion, comes from the US. It's public, but it's also private. And the private foundations actually fund most of our reproductive health services. And they are not held accountable. This is Gates and it's Buffett. And so if Melinda Gates says that she does not support abortion because she's Catholic, that means that Gates will only fund contraception services and will not talk to anything about abortion. And historically, Gates is only interested in what's called long-acting reversible contraceptives, which is like long-term contraceptives, the implant or the injection. And so we have a situation in South Africa where our contraception options are essentially determined by donors and are not consistent with our policy, which is a mixed method mix.
Yeah.
So you can't go in there and say, I would like this, and this is my kind of body. You basically go in there and you get what the health provider is trained to give and what's on the shelves. So this absolutely needs to be part of the public fiscus. We need to stop being beholden to donors, and we need to have a ring-fenced reproductive health budget. And one of the things as well that is coming up is in 2022, we have the option of what's called self-managed abortions. We have abortions by medication. And within COVID, the medical guidelines changed, and private providers took advantage of that. And so you've got Maury Stopes offering abortion via telemedicine. What that means is that women in the state sector are being disadvantaged because it's not an even playing field. The Department of Health needs to make sure that those options are equally available to women and to stop the widening of inequality.
Marian Stevens, thank you so much for your time this evening. Ponzo Pilani, thank you so much for your time this evening. Do really appreciate not just your time here, but the work you guys are doing in reproductive health and abortion rights throughout the country. Ponzo, your journalism is incredible, especially in this space. Go follow Ponzo on Twitter. It is at Ponzo_Pilani. She's got an incredible article out where she went undercover to one of these conversion clinics in 2018. It's scary what you'll read in that article. I read it earlier today and it made my skin crawl. Thank you so much for your time, ladies. Really, really do appreciate it. And that brings us to the end of this week today. Look, we can continue the conversation on Twitter at Oliver_speaking. You can continue the conversation with me on Facebook. Simply find me at Oliver Dickson there, like the page and engage me over there. Or you can watch back anything you may have missed or want to share with a friend, a relative, a colleague. You can share this conversation from our YouTube channel. The link is up right now. As soon as the stream ends, it's right there for you to watch back and share. That's on YouTube on the SAFM page. Alternatively, the podcast of the various conversations we had will be available. Cheers.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Good evening. In the news at 7, delegates at the 9th Provincial Conference of the ANC in the Eastern Cape say they expect that the party's provincial leadership that will emerge out of the conference will prioritize developmental projects that benefit the people of the province. The 3-day conference kicked with the registration process. 1,000